James Lane Allen is quoted as saying, "Adversity doesn't define you. It reveals who you are and how strong you can become in the face of hardship." Let's talk about dealing with adversity on today's episode of the Playing with a Purpose podcast. All right, welcome to the Playing with a Purpose podcast, where we explore topics related to the moral development of collegiate athletes and young people as it pertains to character, responsibility, and purpose. I'm your host, Matt Barker, and today I'm excited to have Freed-Hardeman University head men's soccer coach and one of my good friends, everyone, Jason Elliott, with me on today's episode. Coach, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Yeah, and this is kind of interesting. We'll get a little bit into your background here in a second, but Coach Elliott was my office neighbor when I worked in athletics for about 4 or 5 years. So, I became pretty close to him, talked to him a lot while I was over there. Haven't got to talk to him as much since I've been teaching at Freed. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to have him come on. We had to catch up a little bit here. It's interesting, too, because Coach Elliott's wife, Misty, is my wife's office neighbor at Eastchester Elementary. So we switched from us being office neighbors to our wives being next to each other at the elementary school. So, Coach, tell us a little bit about yourself. You've worked at Freed-Hardeman since 2000. You've pretty much started the soccer program at Freed-Hardeman, but give us a little background about yourself.
Yeah, it's great to be on the podcast, and we miss having you over there in athletics. I'm the head soccer coach at Freed-Hardeman University. Been there since back in the day when we got it started with Charlie Smith, and so enjoy that. And for 22 years, I was coach of the men's and the women's program. Then 2 years ago, gave up the women's to focus on the men's, and so now just the men's soccer coach. Graduated from Freed-Hardeman University, undergraduate and master's from here, and came here from Kansas and met my wife here. She's from Covington. My family, my son is a freshman at Freed-Hardeman, Amos, and I got a daughter, Lydia, who's a sophomore, and another son who's a sixth grader, Isaiah. And my wife teaches kindergarten, so that's kind of the bio.
God bless all kindergarten teachers. My wife is also one. It's not nothing I could ever do. So talk a little bit about the experience coaching both teams. I mean, I know until a couple years ago, you coach the men's and women's soccer, as you mentioned before. Talk about some of the challenges maybe that had with making sure you're dedicating enough time to both teams. Talk about some of the challenges that had.
Yeah, it was a challenge, but we did the best we could with it. Obviously you got two teams, different dynamics with the men, the women, different needs. And so tough to be, every place, where you need to be. Yeah, now we're just able to focus on the men, so it's easier for us. But we really enjoyed it. The relationships that we built with both programs, I got a lot of lifelong relationships with the players and really enjoyed that and made a difference there.
Yeah. So when I think about what we're going to talk about today is dealing with adversity. And one of the sports, I've covered a lot of the sports working in the athletic department, but soccer is one where you have a lot of injuries, a lot of things that happen throughout the year. Soccer is a very long sport. You have 90 minutes that you're out there basically running around. It's a challenge. There's a lot of injuries that happen as a result of it, a lot of hard plays that occur in the game. So when we're thinking about character, a lot of times our character, and this podcast talks a lot about that, our character is shaped by those things that we have to go through. Maybe it's adversity, maybe it's injury, maybe just some challenges throughout the season. How would you personally define character? Maybe how does character shape challenges that we have in life? How does that shape your character?
Yeah, those are good questions. I think character is really who you are as a person. It's what you stand for, what you're about. Reputation sometimes is what other people see, the outsiders may see, and it might be accurate, might not be accurate. We see it all the time of reputation of people, and they disappoint us as they're different behind the scenes. But character is, who you are. It's shaped by how you deal with challenges. People that have been through struggles sometimes can develop a much thicker skin, new outlook on life. Those who haven't maybe don't understand some of those things, some of those struggles that others have dealt with. But in athletics, you have a tremendous opportunity, a range of challenges and opportunities, but it can demonstrate your athleticism. But the more important issue is it's a test of your character.
Yeah.
See who you are. When these injuries and when these things happen, who you are as a person. And so we can't control the events of our lives, but we can control how we act to them. One quote that, you always hear, control the controllables, and those type of things. You determine what your attitude is and your actions, And so character really is revealed when these tough times happen
Yeah.
and how you react to them.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things that's been mentioned over and over throughout the few episodes that we've done so far of this podcast is never let a failure slip by without learning from it. So
Yeah.
the idea of, you are going to build character based on sometimes those struggles and how you deal with those struggles. If you deal with it in a way that's not productive, then that's how you're going to, that's how it's going to transpire in the future. But if you learn from it and learn how to do that better, then your character is going to be strengthened as a result of it because you're developing those qualities that you need. The definition I looked up on character that sometimes I use is the mental and moral qualities distinctive to an individual. So it has this idea of you have these moral qualities that's an ongoing process, but you also have that mental side of it, which can be a challenge in sports. The biggest thing, whatever sport you're playing, there's this mental side to it. So from your experience, how much of that does the mental side play a role in building your character as well?
Oh, it's huge. One of the best books I've read about failure and character is Frank Tarkenton. He wrote a book called The Power of Failure, and it's a great book. But in that book, he mentions one of the biggest mistakes that leaders make is kind of having the God complex, just expecting that we have all the answers, that we know what's going to happen, we can fix every problem. And his point of the book really is that failure is going to happen. Very few teams go undefeated.
Yeah.
And no team's not going to have a setback, injury. So you might as well learn from it. And he says, fail fast so you can succeed quicker.
Yeah.
And learn from it. And that's the main thing. He said that one of the biggest ways of using failure is the positive thinking mantra, that just think positive and it's going to be this magical snapping that everything's going to fix itself. And he says that's not realistic. That's not real life. Thinking about failure and truth in organizations and companies and teams is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Things aren't perfect. How can we get better? What do we need to improve? And how can I help fix it? That's the most important things. And so saying that everything's perfect when it's not is not going to put this fake smile and this fake positive attitude. Instead of using failure, how can we learn from it and get better?
Yeah. And sometimes you just got to own it, right? It's like you can't put on this fake face and say everything's great when it's not, because that's almost in a way being dishonest to you, to the players, and to maybe everyone you're interacting with. So kind of brings us to this idea of building resilience. And you hear that word used a lot in sports. You have to have a resilient attitude. What role does resilience play shaping an individual's character?
It's interesting that some things happen negatively to people, and one person reacts one way, the other person completely different. And it's got to be that resilience that they have in them, maybe what they've been taught, what they've been through. But resilience makes all the difference. You're going to have disappointments. There's going to be struggles. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah.
But the question is, how are you going to use this opportunity? How are you going to use it to influence others, to flourish, be resilient? So if we know in life that things are going to go wrong and we're prepared for it already, instead of thinking our lives are going to be, everything's going to be perfect. If we're prepared for it already, then we'll know how to react. John F. Kennedy, I love the quote, "To be courageous is an opportunity that sooner or later presents itself to all of us."
Yeah.
So we're going to have an opportunity. We got a plan for the future, but we don't know really what the future holds. So we better be resilient and better know how we're going to react to things. I think as leaders of any group, one of the most important things is to lead yourself first. So I want others to follow me, but how am I going to lead myself? What do I stand for? What am I about? How am I going to react? How are things going to affect me? And I've got to decide how I'm going to lead myself in my own life, and then in turn lead others and show that resilience. If I'm not prepared, if I'm not going to be resilient, or I haven't decided that already, chaos will happen when the struggles come.
Right. Yeah, you got to have this mindset as a leader, as you mentioned, and when going through times of adversity, the one person that a lot of, specifically in an athletic environment, they're going to look to is the coach. How are they responding to this? And a lot of times they follow suit. So when we're thinking about going through times of adversity, you mentioned it comes down to you as the leader. You have to make sure you're setting the right example and you're building that character so that others can follow that. But what is the most important lesson it teaches you about who you are as a person, maybe when you're going through these adversity that you have to go through?
Yeah, it shows your team, your company, whoever you're leading, what you're about, who you are as a person. they've got to see anybody can be great, have a great attitude when the sun is shining.
Right.
How are you when it's raining? I remember in high school, sometimes I'd go run with the cross country runners just to get in shape for soccer. I wasn't about all that, but
Yeah.
and they would go faster, speed up at the hills, and I'm like, what are we doing here? And they said, you push through it. It shows resiliency, shows
Yeah.
that the most important thing that teaches you as a person dealing with adversity is getting stronger through those. And so we can't be surprised at it. We got to be prepared beforehand. But you see those coaches that everything might be going disarray in the game, and they're sitting there and they're calm as could be, and their team plays with poise.
Yeah.
And then you see others that are, the opposite, and maybe when I was younger, probably a little bit more
Yeah.
towards the other way,
Yeah.
but maybe you grow a little bit from wisdom and from experience, and just realizing that they have to see you understand that it's gonna happen. We got to react to it in adversity, but all of us can act a certain way when things are great.
Yeah.
It's about when difficulty comes. Man's Search for Meaning is a book by Viktor Frankl, and he said, the way in which a man accepts his fate and all the suffering it entails, the way in which he takes up his cross gives him an ample opportunity, even in the most difficult circumstances, to add a deeper meaning to his life. It may be remain brave, dignified, unselfish, or may be a bitter fight for self-preservation. You prove whether your sufferings are worth it or not, whether you're going to gain from it. And so I think that's an important lesson that teaches you as a person.
Yeah. And one of the things that I looked up when I was kind of looking up some of these information on dealing with adversity was sometimes the lesson you learn is you have the values and priorities that you sometimes realize what's most important, right?
Yeah.
So when you go through different challenges, sometimes the things that you tend to worry about or agonize over, when you go through a challenge or an adversity, whatever that might be, you tend to realize those things that are most important. Maybe that's family, maybe that's your relationship with God.
Yeah.
And you tend to focus more on that. Have you kind of experienced a little bit of that when maybe there's times in your life that personally or with the season where you kind of tend to focus more on those things that are most important?
Yeah, it puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
When you go through something, suddenly the little things that really bothered you don't bother you as much.
Yeah.
And also you realize who is important in your life. The people that are there for you. Obviously, your church, your family, obviously your relationship with God, and you focus on those things instead of maybe the superficial things that maybe we get caught up sometimes each day thinking about.
Yeah. And thinking about, you mentioned this earlier, but empathy was kind of what you were talking about earlier as far as how you can sometimes sympathize with what other people are going through. So how has overcoming personal challenges with whatever it is that people are dealing with, how does that help foster a greater empathy for others going through maybe similar struggles?
Yeah, I think it can really help, think about overcoming challenges. It can give you greater empathy because now you've experienced something. If someone's lost a loved one, let's say they lost a parent or something, and you've never experienced, much loss,
Yeah.
sometimes it's a little harder to relate to it. But then when you have, then you realize, boy, that is tough. And so using this challenge, this struggle, how can I use it to impact others? I believe that that's one of the main perspectives that we got to have with whatever it is. So the best thing about challenges, how can I help other people? How can I influence them? And ultimately, the mission of life and the mission of what we're trying to do is to serve others. So thinking about our lives, thinking about who's in control of it, God is in control of it, and we're a servant of His. So it's a much deeper focus on helping other people now.
Yeah. And speaking of that, one of the things I saw when I was looking some information up on this is going through challenges can help you foster this empathy, but it's because a lot of times you're better able to recognize things in other people, whether that's pain, whether that's hardship, whether that's any struggle they're going through. Someone that maybe has gone through similar struggles are better able to recognize that in others. And that's something I'd never really thought about before. You think about them, well, you can kind of understand what they're going through, but maybe not always recognizing the signs of someone that maybe you're emotional about something. If you've been through that same thing, you're better able to see that and maybe better able to help them because of that. Other people might walk by and never notice that's even going on, but someone that's been through some struggles, hardships, they're going to be able to better recognize that. Is that kind of the experience you've had as well?
Yeah, I think you can start with experience and with time. You start seeing more of those signs of what you're talking about. When you first start out like coaching or something, someone misses practice or someone has comes to practice and they got their head down or something, you're immediately like, well, they need to get their act together.
They need to get more sleep the night before. Quit staying up so late. Yeah.
But, and sometimes that is true. They
Yeah.
need to get their act together. But sometimes there could be something else going on, and we need to try to, find out what that is, and sometimes easier said than done.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes there's different situations that are harder to get to the bottom of, for sure. Adversity often requires us to endure hardships, like we've talked about already. How has enduring tough times taught you patience? I think that's another word. Resilience is a big word we talk about. Patience is another one. That's something that's tough. How does learning patience shape your character long term?
Yeah, patience is something, that all of us, I think, struggle with. I'm very patient, just wish it would hurry up.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I think when you've gone through struggles and you've gone through difficulties, then you try to see more of the big picture and what the overall purpose of us being here and helping people is. One time I was down, feeling sorry for myself, hadn't been able to do much, in a while, and then I got a phone call from a friend back home, and he said that he had not been out of the house for a year other than to a couple of doctor's appointments.
Right.
You hang up the phone, then you say, I need to get over myself.
Yeah.
I need to start.
Some people have it a lot worse than I've got it. Yeah.
And so patience is about trusting in God, His plan. We don't know what His plan is, and sometimes we need to just patiently endure. We know that God has taught us that we're going to be persecuted. There's going to be tough times. He never said that it's going to be easy.
Right.
And so why should we be surprised? All those who desire to live godly are going to be persecuted. There's going to be things that are going to not go well sometimes. So having the patience in other people and understanding they're going through some things, I need to be patient with them. Like I want them to be patient with us, the golden rule, obviously. But, patience is something that I think we all struggle with and each day can get better at.
Yeah, and sometimes it's difficult to learn patience until we go through something where we have to have patience, right?
Yeah.
And you don't really know exactly how to handle that. A youth minister I had growing up used to always say, be careful if you pray for patience, because if you pray for patience, you'll probably have something that's going to test your patience that you're going to have to learn how to deal with.
Yeah.
And so, be careful what you pray for. If you want patience, you're probably going to be having some situations that come your way that's going to cause you to have patience. And so sometimes that's tough. Sometimes having that patience and resilience, I think a lot of that has to do with our culture, right? We're a culture or society that we want things right away. We don't want to wait. It's just the way we are, it's the kind of built into how we are as a society. And patience is not something that we're always our strong suit. And so especially in athletics too, when we think about that, we want results right away. We want to make sure we have success right away. And sometimes that takes time. And probably from your experience coaching 20 plus years, you've had some good seasons, you've had some bad seasons, you've had anywhere in between. But maybe how have you had to demonstrate patience maybe with some of those challenges that come throughout a season?
Yeah, I think that is our society today. You see everybody posts on social media or everything. This is what I got. Look what I'm eating for supper. Look at how great things are. And so everybody wants things immediately. What they don't see, what we don't advertise is the daily grind each day.
Yep.
So you have to look at the big picture. You have to see what long term, what are we shooting for here? And ultimately, it's about relationships. It's about impacting other people. When you see success, sometimes our society is based upon scoreboard, and it starts early. So your young kid is playing soccer at 4 years old. And what's the first question grandma or grandpa asks him? Did you score? Did you win? Did you score?
Yeah.
And it's not about, did you work hard?
Yeah.
Did you play together? And so it's all about the scoreboard.
It's me. Yeah.
It's me, and it's about the scoreboard. When in fact, a lot of times you could be ahead in the scoreboard at the end of the game, and you really did not accomplish what you needed to. You really did not play as a team. You didn't play up to your ability. And then there's other times where the team is just better than you.
Yeah.
Okay. And you worked as hard as you could. So it's about seeing what is the goal of what we're trying to accomplish. And the goal is for us to improve, become better as people, ultimately develop that character, show our resilience, and display our talents for God, but glorify Him.
Right.
And so seeing that big picture helps.
Yeah. Now, we talked about this earlier, but facing adversity can impact your relationships. And you mentioned that thinking about what things mean to you, you kind of reevaluate that when you go through hardships and challenges. You realize maybe what's most important. And sometimes that's your relationships. You realize which relationships are most important. the people that have been there for you. So how have you seen maybe adversity shape your relationships with others? Have the challenges maybe that you've been through deepened your connections or caused you to reevaluate them? And what kind of causes that within adversity when you face that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I've learned over the years is that the things that we're focused on matter very little.
Yeah.
So you think everyone's going to remember this game. Okay, this big game you won 2-1, and it was a comeback game. What matters when you're going through adversity, you hear from former players, and they're like calling you, hey, coach, I heard you're going through this.
Yeah.
Anything I can do for you? It's the relationships that matter.
Yeah.
It's those bonds. And yes, obviously you want to have success. You want to win the game. But those relationship with people, when you've gone through adversity, their relationship with you, your relationship with people at church, obviously those who are close to you. But in a team, I've been blown away by players that I've heard from, for 20 years later, and they call up and they remember some type of relationship, something that you did for them, something that you helped them, or just your example. Hey, coach, this is something that I saw you go through, and this is something that's helped me. I got a letter from Julie. She played for us, and she was going through a boot camp and some tough times. And one of the things that struck me about her letter was she said, don't ever not push these players. She said, so when I went through all this stuff, it was easier than all those times, working hard and seeing through the adversity that we went through.
Yeah, it's that work ethic kind of that you're building in them,
Yeah. And so that you remember those bonds with players.
And you talked about this, and maybe you've already answered it a little bit with the relationships that you build, maybe help people with this. But some people, when they go through hardships or adversity or struggles, they might become bitter, or maybe they'll be like, why is this happening to me kind of attitude, and when they're dealing with adversity, while others seem to be where they use that adversity and try to help others and have empathy for others like we've talked about already. What do you think determines whether someone grows or shrinks in character when facing a hardship? It could be those relationships you talked about, people you have around you, but what are some things that maybe shape that?
I think what shapes it is when they start young, are they taught to serve other people? Is their focus inward or outward? I think that's one of the biggest things. People that are focused inward, and it's the selfie culture, let me get myself in everything, they're not going to be as looking for other people, and they're going to become more bitter from adversity. They're going, why me? Why does this happen to me? And that's the first reaction. Instead of, how can I use this? I've got to be resilient. Then obviously their relationship with God. The more that you trust in God and His plan, the more you're going to be less likely to be, woe is me, the woe is me song. Well, look at all the stuff I'm going through. And the more you're going to be, hey, this is tough. This is not easy. I've got to deal with it. I've got to flourish. I've got to impact others the best I can. And on the other side, I'm going to be able to help out even more.
Yeah.
But those type of things, and then just the attitude, you see one person has a struggle and their attitude makes them bitter because of the self-focus. And the other attitude is, hey, there's a lot of people who have it worse. There's a lot of other people who have gone through struggles, and I've got to come out the other side. I've got to impact other people. How can I use this and flourish?
Yeah. Yeah, I like what you mentioned there with prayer too, because, if we pray, we have the Bible that tells us you're not going to endure a struggle that you cannot bear, right?
Correct.
We have those encouraging verses. And one thing that we haven't talked about as much, but like sometimes that's not easy when you're in the moment. Sometimes there's a lot of reflection involved with that, where you don't necessarily see the benefits of, oh yeah, I really, really enjoyed going through this 0-15 season. That was really fun to go through, but looking back, and I've heard this from multiple coaches, it's like we learned more from that season than we did winning half the games, because we learned what not to do, or we learned how to do this better. So sometimes going through these things, it takes a lot of prayer, but a lot of probably reflection on, what did we do here? How can we do this differently? So maybe from your experience, the adversity, how has reflection kind of played a role in that?
Yeah, when you look back, you see kind of how things work together. We've had teams that have been very good that it's been miserable. Because everybody had all the answers, no one wanted to listen.
Yeah.
And then there's been other teams where you look back and you reflect, and hey, maybe the results weren't quite what we wanted, but we really developed and grew and really did more and accomplished. So you're more reflective on kind of what you've gone through. You'll watch NCAA tournament. I guarantee you there'll be teams in the Final Four, and they'll be interviewed. And what will every coach say, or every player when they're interviewed? this team has been through so much adversity.
Yeah.
And they'll always, and usually they won't go into specifics, but those championship level teams that accomplish that, and even those who don't make it there, you see they've gone through some struggles. And usually a team right now, before the tournament starts, is someone who's a team who maybe struggled midseason and then they get on a roll.
Yep.
And I think that's because they went through it, they were reflective, they learned from it, and now they're going on a roll. And usually it's not just the most talented team. It's the team that has gone through something.
And they learned how to deal with it in the future. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And so for someone that's currently facing a challenging situation, whatever that might be, what advice would you give to them on how to use that experience to shape their character for the better and maybe not allow you to get bitter and upset, but also, using that to help other people? What advice maybe would you give to someone for that?
The first thing I would say is focus on what's the most important thing in your life. If the most important thing in your life is winning or yourself or getting ahead, then it's going to be a shallow life. It's going to be, you're going to struggle. If your relationship with God is what really matters, a relationship with other people, then surround yourself with people that are going to encourage you. Find out, maybe there's someone who's been through this. Maybe there's someone who can help you and support you. Surround yourself with those people who can really help you, and focus on your relationship with God. Trust in Him no matter what. Focus on who can help me, but then don't focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Where's someone else on the team, in my organization? Who can I help with this? And when you focus more on others, then you're going to feel a lot better about yourself. You're going to be more rewarding.
Yeah.
You're going to be able to accomplish a lot more.
Yeah. That's good advice, and sometimes not easy to do, but
true.
it's something that's we should all strive for sure. And again, sometimes going through things, it doesn't always feel like that's the first thing we want to do.
Correct.
But again, sometimes it takes reflection and saying, this is what I need to do, even if it's not what I want to do right now, because this is how I need to approach this situation, regardless of what the struggle is, right? Whether it's a losing season, a health battle, injury. We didn't talk as much about injuries this podcast, but that's a huge one, with players, the morale, the mental side of it. Like, I'm injured. This is, again, it goes back to, if we're looking out for other people and there's more of a motivation for us than just wins and losses, if something happens to our athletic ability, we still have other things that we can fall back on. It's not just about our athletic, but our identity shouldn't just be about our athletics. There should be these other things to deal with: character, helping others, teammates, and helping encourage them. And like you said, the most successful teams are ones that are looking out for other people. It's not always just about me, which is hard in our society, to think about that. So really appreciate your thoughts, Coach. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we're done? Or
like you said, the most important thing is looking at other people. One final thought I would have is, we don't have to tell everybody what we're going through.
Yeah.
We can keep things private, and we will still have the right example and just accomplish a lot by just quietly living a godly life and following Him.
Yeah, doing what God wants us to do. We're setting that example every day of our life. Yeah. So, all right. So thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Playing with the Purpose podcast. Special thanks again to Jason Elliott for being my guest this week. Be sure to check out this episode and future episodes on Spotify or anywhere you listen to podcasts. You can also find the Playing with the Purpose podcast on the Ministry League Podcast Network, the Freed-Hardeman Athletics Champions of Character website at gofhulions.com/champions of character, and on the NAIA Champions of Character website at naia.org/champions of character. Join us for our next episode as I talk with Freed-Hardeman Bible professor Matt Cook on the topic of faith and spirituality. And remember, winning isn't just about the scoreboard, it's about the character we build along the way. We'll see you next time on the Playing with a Purpose podcast.